Okay, welcome everybody. So happy to have you all here, and I'm super excited for today's guest, Jake Sustaita, our assistant conductor here at Pacific Symphony, who started literally in the middle of the pandemic. So it's going to be a really fun afternoon, evening, getting to know Jake, and I'm super honored that he's here. Before we get started, as I always do, I want to give everybody just a brief review of how we can interact with each other tonight. We would love anybody's questions or comments for Jake. You can put those, there's a Q&A button, depending on what device you're on, there's a Q&A button you can use. There's also the chat function. Whether you put them in one or the other, we will get them, and I will try to get as many of them to Jake during the hour as possible. Also, I wanted to, as a little something for Jake as we're going. You know, as I said, Jake moved here in the middle of a pandemic after everything has been sort of shut down. He hasn't gotten to experience a lot of the amazing things Southern California has to offer. So I thought it would be fun tonight. If any of you guys have any suggestions for your favorite activities, restaurants, cultural events that Jake can look forward to once things open up, throw those in the chat or the Q&A box, and I will put together a list and we will give them to Jake, and that will be his homework, and we will follow up with him and see how many he completes over the next season. So feel free to do that as we're going, and we will put those together. So as I said, Jake Sustaita is my guest today, and super excited. Just a little bit about Jake. He joined last spring, 2020, our infamous spring of 2020, as the new assistant conductor for Pacific Symphony. He auditioned last January. Before coming to Southern California, he was director of orchestral studies at Sam Houston University in Texas. He was there since 2015. He has worked with orchestras across the country, including the Juilliard Orchestra, the Blue Water Chamber Orchestra, as a cover conductor for the Houston Symphony, assistant conductor with Charles Dutoit and the National Youth Orchestra of the United States. Very exciting. He's also been music director of the Minnesota Philharmonic, the Conroe Symphony, the Southeast Texas Youth Symphony, and principal guest conductor of the Cleveland Orchestra Youth Orchestra. So, Jake, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Ben. It's so great to have this opportunity to chat with you. You know, normally I've been seeing you on stage, but we haven't had a lot of time to talk. So I'm really excited that we have this hour to get to know each other a little bit better, and for me to introduce myself to some people in the community that we haven't had an opportunity yet because of the conditions that we're working right now. So thanks for this opportunity, and hello to everybody. It is an honor and a pleasure to be here. So thanks again.
Yeah, and I noticed just going through the list of some of our attendees, we have so many Pacific Symphony family members and great supporters of the symphony. So this is going to be a great hour for us all to get to know each other a little bit. So I want to start at the very beginning, because one thing I've always wondered about conductors is, you talk to violinists and pianists who say, oh, I started when I was 3, or I was playing piano when I was in the womb. And, I don't imagine that conducting is quite the same. I don't know how many, 5-year-old conducting students I've seen, although who knows. But I'm curious, what was your first introduction to the world of music and music performance?
I remember going from elementary school to middle school was from where I was at, was where you picked your elective. And it was band, choir, orchestra, or art. The school district that I was in actually offered a program for 5th graders. If they wanted to get a slight head start after school, you could pick one of those, and the teacher would come over twice a week and get you started so that you weren't at ground level 0 when you began in 6th grade. Well, I asked my parents if I could join the orchestra one, because a lot of my friends were joining it. And my parents said, no, because my brother, who's a little bit older than me, started playing French horn in 6th grade, and he was great. I mean, he excelled very quickly and was really admired by the teachers of the band. Well, it wasn't but 2 years in that he gave that up and went into football. So my parents were a little concerned that they would rent an instrument for me and it might not last. So then in 6th grade, I said, I'm gonna pick orchestra, but you have to sign the form. And they said, well, what's involved? Oh, we've got to rent an instrument. Why don't you go to choir? Because I think they were just thinking, you say you're interested, your brother said he was interested, are you sure? And choir involved no renting of an instrument. But I was like stubborn about it, and my parents said, fine. And there was a school viola that I could use. So my beginning class in 6th grade had 3 students, and we had to choose an instrument. 2 chose violin. I chose viola. And I think back to that moment, the teacher played all the instruments for us. There was just something about the viola. It was woodsy and melancholy and just had this quality about it. And I thought, well, of course the violin's awesome. Of course the cello's awesome. But that thing, that's like intriguing in a different way. So I picked viola and just became a really pretty proficient violist very quickly, rose to a pretty good level very fast. And as a surprise, at the end of my 6th grade year, my parents showed up at school with a great rented viola that like was everything to me. It was bigger than the one I had at school. It was fancy. It had this nice case, at least for a 6th grader. So from there, I just stuck with viola. I loved it. It was my instrument. Sure, I loved playing melody things and what that involved, but mostly I really enjoyed being an inner voice, being someone who's at the heart of the soprano and the bass. Now, I couldn't have articulated that back then, but now I can look back and see that. So it was probably in my 7th grade year. Now I was in the advanced orchestra. I went from beginning to advanced, and we were playing awesome music, at least for me. And I was loving everything, every piece we got. Region orchestra, I just like classical music came into my life and I wanted more. So I got a Dover score from, I think, a Half Price Books. It was Handel, water music, and Royal Fireworks music, and a chopstick, a takeout chopstick, and a CD that they used to sell at the corner of the like the Kmart's and Walmart's, best of classical music. Well, it had water music and Royal Fireworks. So I found my way through a score, not even knowing how to read other clefs, found the tracks, and I started conducting in my room. And from there, I would conduct anything, whether I had the music or not. I got into my youth orchestra in San Antonio by 8th grade, and I was hooked. So for me, I've been conducting to recordings or to my stereo since I can remember. And as a viola player, as I started advancing and in high school, my dream was actually to be a quartet violist. That was the thing that intrigued me the most. I loved orchestra, but playing in a quartet was everything. And sure enough, I created a quartet with some of my friends in youth orchestra, and we were one of the first groups to play on From the Top, which is a radio show that's based out of New England Conservatory. Well, we thought we were rock stars because I was a junior in high school, and we applied for this thing, finally heard back. They flew us to Boston, housed us in a great hotel, and then we performed and were live on radio at New England Conservatory, Jordan Hall. As a junior in high school, I was like, wow, is this what it's like to be a musician and a quartet violist? I'm in. And so I had a lot of successes and a lot of great opportunities early on. But something about, when I think about it, being in a quartet, I always had a strong opinion about music. In fact, I was that viola player in the quartet who was telling the violinist how to lead better and what to do. So there was like a bossy side of me being a musician. I knew that, and I had to get that under wraps. But I always had this strong feeling and opinion about how music should go and the way it should be played. I think that was the conductor in me trying to find its way out. So I went into undergrad as a viola performance major, loved it, of course, but it was in my undergrad that I was allowed towards the end to pick electives. So I picked advanced conducting because it was taught by the orchestra conductor, who I thought was amazing. I ended up taking that class 5 semesters. I still hold the record at that university. It was one of those classes that you could take over and over. The subject matter was similar every semester, but like doing scales as an instrumentalist, we will continue to do those over and over and over because we're always refining our technique and advancing ourselves as a musician. So I found I was getting better and I loved it. And that's when I got hooked. I thought, wow, I think I really want to do this. But I was left with a dilemma: viola, conducting. And I asked my teachers, I asked mentors, they all said, well, you seem to be pretty good at both. It's hard to be a conductor. It's hard to be violist. But if you want to do one of them like really, really, really well, you'll probably have to commit to it. You know, whatever path, you can do both for a while, but if you want to be a quartet violist or an orchestral violist, you're going to have to, give it your all. and commit to that, or the same with conducting. So from my undergrad, I went to Rice University as a viola fellow, studying with James Dunham, but I was fortunate enough to also work with Larry Ratcliffe as a conductor. So that's when I got my first job, which was with the Southeast Texas Youth Symphony. And it was amazing. I didn't know what I was doing, but I loved every minute of it. And it was at that point that I knew I want to get really good at viola so that I have a sense of what it is to master an instrument or be a master on an instrument, master's degree, before I dare start telling musicians how to play music and sharing my thoughts as a conductor. And my mentors all thought that was a really good idea. So I finished my viola degree and I was studying conducting at Rice. And then from there, I made the switch. I said, now I want to go into conducting. Really, this is, I think, where I will make the most impact and make a big difference as a musician. It was hard at first, being a young conductor and trying to get your foot in the door. So I went and got another master's degree, this time in conducting, and then got a doctorate degree, and this time in opera conducting, which is a little unorthodox for a non-piano player or a non-singer, but I was always taken by the voice. Something about it just intrigued me from the moment I played my first opera in a pit, and the difficulty of opera conducting. Not only do you have the orchestral, the instrumental forces, but you've got stage action, vocal action, text, and everything that could go wrong is going to go wrong in an opera. And I loved that challenge. And it was studying opera conducting that I really found my voice as a conductor, and I found my technique. Because if you can get through an opera, especially a difficult one, there's nothing that scares you much, I should say. So that's kind of how I got to where I'm at right now, at least as a conductor from the viola path. And I still play viola. It's actually right back there. I try to play as much as I can within the time that I have, because playing in a section or playing a gig in a quartet reminds me of what it's like to sit, to be a player, especially if I'm playing in an orchestra, because I tell myself, remember what it's like to have a conductor work with you. What are the difficulties? What are the things that really work? Don't forget that perspective. And I hope and I think that's helped me be successful as a conductor, that I am a player and I grew up playing in orchestras, but also that I try to continue doing that as well, so that I'm aware of what the experience might be like when I'm saying, do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that. And so that's part of just my personal philosophy. Like, remember what it's like to be a player and, be great with people.
Yeah, I mean, that's fascinating. I guess my most pressing question after hearing all that is, what's your favorite viola joke?
Oh, well, the funny thing is, of course, I've had a lot of those viola jokes. And then I went into conducting and got even worse jokes. So I have to say my favorite viola joke is probably inappropriate to share, but I'll tell you privately at rehearsal on Saturday.
Okay, it's a deal. For those of you who don't know, the viola is the butt of many, many jokes in the orchestra, for better or worse. And poor Meredith, who's in the chat and who is very happy that you are a fellow violist, bears the brunt of most of mine. So, I want to go back a little bit to, you studying music in Texas. And I'm just interested by that, because as someone who did not grow up in Texas studying music, I've heard so many things about, the music education is taken so seriously there, and the competition there is so much more heightened than most other places I've heard of. And so I'm just curious what your experience was like going through that system, and if you could sort of share with us how that system works and what that was like for you.
Absolutely. It is the country of Texas, by the way, right? That's what people say in Texas. And I thought it was really fun that I went from being a Texan, a pretty large state, to a larger state, California now. So I get the scope of being in a big state. So I grew up in the music system, so it all occurred to me like normal. It was not until I started branching out and going other places that I realized Texas is not that normal in comparison to other states. Most of it is because of its size. It does have a lot of people living there, like California. So with that at its source, you have a lot of opportunity for greatness, and there's a lot of greatness there. So education, and especially music education, is taken very seriously there. It's a competitive state. The way people look at football is very similar to the way they look at music. There is a competition, hopefully to help better themselves and better their groups, not to be competitive by nature. But so that was part of what we did at school. When the school director said region orchestra is coming up, and oftentimes at many schools, if you're in the top group, you are required to audition. You don't get a choice. Back in my day, we all had a choice, but we all did it. It was kind of expected. And I loved it. It was an opportunity to go play full orchestra music as an 8th grader, as a high schooler, if your school didn't have full orchestra. And back then, very few did. So I loved it. I mean, it got me into my youth orchestra too. I took any opportunity to play music and more music that I could. The solo and ensemble competition there is incredibly intense and nerve-wracking, but I'm glad I did all those things because it taught me how to have, confidence and nerves when it comes to performing as an instrumentalist and just being a musician. Funny enough, when you're in high school in Texas, you do region orchestras, there's honor orchestras, but the top of the line is the all-state orchestra. And because Texas is so big, in my day, there were 3 orchestras, and I think now there's 5, and they're still gigantic. I mean, you're talking about an orchestra with a violin 1 section of 26 violin 1s, just because they need to give opportunities to so many great students, and the level is extraordinary. So I was one of those all-staters, and this is where I met for the very first time, and it changed my life, Carl Sinclair. He was one of the conductors. He happens to be a Texan and a regular guest conductor for Texas All-States, but he came to conduct, and I had never experienced that level of music making, that intense level of music making, that rigor, and that someone asked me recently, like, what was it? What do you mean what was it? I said, well, it was when someone walks in the room and that aura, kind of like, you can tell they walked in the room and you like look to the door and sure enough they did. And everybody's kind of transfixed. That's what it was like, at least for me and a lot of my friends back then, because he's an intense conductor, super knowledgeable and really demanding. And we were good enough for him to demand a lot. So I felt like every moment I had to give more. And it taught me about myself and what music making can be at a high, high level. And that there is so much more to learn and practice and do as a player. So that experience changed my life, also being in an all-state orchestra. So that began also my relationship with Maestro Sinclair over the years, mostly through summer festivals and particularly through the Texas Music Festival. I have sat principal viola for him a number of times. I've sat in the viola section for him when he's come to guest conduct. And then I became an orchestra manager, assistant conductor for this same festival, and got to work with him as an assistant conductor. Every time he came as a guest, I would ask, Maestro, would you please watch my videos with me, give me input, or I'm conducting Appalachian Spring with a chamber group. Could you come coach me? He was always there, always willing to give me time. And he was always extremely honest with me, which was tough because I realized, wow, I thought that was good. Never mind. Until he just opened my eyes to different levels, deeper levels of refining my technique as a conductor, as a player, how deep you could go with the study of music, the interpretation of music. And most importantly, I think, is the level of preparation that goes into being a conductor and the relationships you create with the orchestra, with administration, and how important that is when you serve in that role that has so many responsibilities. So I know I kind of went into a different direction, but that's my Texas, music education experience as a youngster. Well, then as I finished my doctorate degree, I taught high school for 1 year as I was finishing my coursework, which was really, really great in that it taught me so much of what directors go through, especially in Texas, the demands that are on them, the pressure, the size of these gigantic programs, sometimes with 2 directors, sometimes with 3, and sometimes just 1, and what that involves. So I was so glad to do that. Then I was fortunate enough to get my university job in Texas, and I was there for 5 years before coming to Pacific Symphony. That was amazing. And so being a professor in the state of Texas as a Texan really helped me cultivate relationships with directors and with students that really taught me a lot about myself and about who I am as a music educator, my love of working with young musicians, and my love of working with teachers, teaching them to be better teachers and to be more effective conductors and musicians. This was such a joy and really fulfilling. But when this opportunity came along, I've said this many times to many people, it was truly a dream come true, something that I always wanted to happen, working with Carl, working with a great orchestra. And so it was an easy choice when it came to it. When I got the call, I said yes.
Yeah, and we're glad you did. And we're gonna circle back to, I want to hear all about the audition and all that stuff in a little bit too. You mentioned sort of how you first got into conducting and how you transitioned both from viola and sort of had both going for a while. But I'm just curious, at least I've wondered this. So whenever I wonder something, I hope other people have wondered it too. When someone decides that, okay, I want to dip my toes into the world of conducting, or maybe go down that career path and see where it leads, how do you start with that? I assume that someone doesn't just say, oh, here's an orchestra, get in front of them and conduct them, right? So I'm just curious, to me, the trajectory for starting an instrument seems very clear. For a conductor, it seems less so to me. So I'm just curious if you could walk us through what happens once you say, I want to try this.
Yeah, that is such a great question. And I think the first major hurdle that someone goes through to become a conductor. And I think part of it, that hurdle, is a part of the introduction to, you want to do this job? Get ready, because it's going to be full of hurdles, major obstacles to get to where you want to go that you have to navigate. Because there is, like you said, there is no one path, yet starting an instrument, it's kind of a clear process, or it's much more clear. There's a few ways to do it, but there's a few ways to do it. With the conductor, there's infinite amount of ways to kind of break over into that. So that hurdle is difficult. You have to, I think, basically, as an instrumentalist somewhere, or a vocalist, you realize, I want to do this. Well, start doing it. And what does that mean? Letting the people know who you work with. So if it's at school, at a university, you start taking conducting classes, which a lot of people already have to do as part of their music degree, and go further than the conducting 1 class. Keep going. Go to the 2nd or the 3rd or the advanced. Then start letting the conductors know. If you're an orchestra, let the orchestra conductor know you're fascinated. You want to know more. Maybe if they need a person to conduct a sectional, or just stand there while they go listen, you're available. Now, at that time, you probably don't know much other than class things, so they may not call on you to do that, but you have to start telling people, this is my interest and where I want to break into. That's the first thing. You have to let people know. Then they'll say, do you have any experience? No. Okay. So now you have to get some experience. I think the best thing to do is ask your friends, get a quintet together. Get 2 people to play a quintet. Now you have 10 people, but playing a quintet. Just get your friends together to make music and conduct. Buying them some food after that rehearsal doesn't hurt either. But the other important lesson in that is the relationships you have with your colleagues. As an instrumentalist, this is important for a conductor, because early on, a lot of it is you asking people to do you favors. So if you're a difficult person, or just someone people don't know, it will be tough for you to recruit people to just sit for you for an hour or 30 minutes and play for you. And so I think this is also an important lesson for conductors. You need to be a good colleague. You need to be someone that people will work with and do favors for, especially early on. So for me, being in advanced conducting for 5 semesters, part of that class, we got to conduct each other, and it got bigger and bigger. And so that was good opportunity for me. I was like kind of very fortunate. So I was with the Texas Music Festival as a viola player. Then over the course, I was with them for years and years and years. As I was getting a little older, I became the assistant librarian and then the librarian, and I was still a viola player in the orchestra. My duties started to shift, and I moved into being an orchestra manager, first an assistant, and then I took over. Well, since I was part of the administration, or the staff at least, I had an idea one week. The orchestra was doing Heldenleben. I was first chair, and I went to the director of the festival, who I knew pretty well from all the years, and I said, so, you know, I'm interested in conducting. What if I asked the orchestra, out of the kindness of their heart, if they would stay for 10 minutes after one of the rehearsals, and I conducted just the opening section, just the introduction to Heldenleben, 4.5 minutes. He said, okay, I'm okay with it as long as our conductor is. I said, okay, good. First mini hurdle accomplished. So I went to the conductor, who knew me a little bit, told him my idea, aspiring young conductor. Would he allow me to do this? He said, sure, absolutely, tomorrow. And I was like, oh, tomorrow, okay. So I got my camera, I'm super excited. Heldenleben had my Dover score. And he said, we have a person in the orchestra wants to conduct, and he called me up and he's like, I'm gonna go listen in the hall. So he went and listened. I did the introduction. It was amazing because it's a great orchestra. I have the video somewhere. I looked wild. I was all over the place, but it was awesome. And I had a great time. And the orchestra played pretty well. Then I looked back and 4.5 minutes had gone by. I was out of breath, you know, because amazing. And I was working way too hard. He came to the stage. He was like, very good, do it again. So I got to do it again. And the orchestra was great. And that began, so my first video was Ein Heldenleben with a festival orchestra that played it incredibly well. That's not common, I would say, but it all happened because I asked, because I was persistent. I was ready for a no, but you have to ask first. And from that, a lot of opportunities opened up. They created the assistant conductor spot for me since I was there. And then over the years, I conducted a number of chamber things with the festival. And who knows, maybe one day they'll invite Carl and me to do another week, you know?
Yeah, it's awesome. And we actually have a video, the clip from your very first time. No, I'm just totally kidding.
Oh, no.
No, it's really interesting. I think it's interesting what you say about, you know, maybe because the trajectory of a conductor is a much less traveled path and sort of much less standardized. It takes a lot more sort of gumption on the part of each person to sort of seek out those opportunities and make opportunities for yourself. You don't have something like maybe like the all-state program in Texas, where it's a very sort of set way of doing things and set path for people. So obviously that experience at Texas Music Festival is a formative experience. I'm wondering if you have any other standout experiences from when you were sort of learning conducting and getting into it that sort of shape how you view your role as a conductor and your sort of view of the profession as a whole.
There are many like important moments. My first conducting concert where I was actually performing, I was a graduate conductor. And my very first concert was with, so the orchestra director assigned the graduate conductors, the winners, the second, third, and honorable mention winners of our concerto competition. He worked with the top prize winner in the symphony orchestra, but he decided that year he would let the honorable second, third place perform with the graduate conductors and the chamber orchestra. So he said, for you, since you're a violist, Jake, you will do our vocal winner, who won on a movement, 2 movements from Berlioz's song cycle, La Nuit d'été. And there was a tie with another singer who sang 2 arias from Strauss's Ariadne auf Naxos. And I was like, okay, I've heard of Strauss for sure. And yeah, I've heard of Berlioz. I don't know that song cycle, but I was like, okay. Well, little did I know, and at the time I was totally unaware, this was incredibly demanding repertoire that I was singing with, or performing with really competent graduate and doctoral student singers. But I was just loving every minute of it. And I look back and I think, so my first concert was Berlioz, La Nuit d'été, and Ariadne auf Naxos, selections from those pieces. I'm glad I was blind at the time, because had I known what I know now, I would have been like, well, I'm not ready for this. Well, after the fact, you know, we talked about it like years later, and I said, why did you give those pieces to me? Like, thank you, but what? He said, I knew you could do it. And I knew you needed to experience that to get an idea of what still to do. And I mean, it changed my life, and probably is the reason I became an opera conductor. So that was my first go at it. And, you know, along the way, I've had this incredible opportunity as a young conductor. By the time I had been conducting for like 3 years as an official graduate conductor and on, I had done Also Sprach Zarathustra twice, Alpine Symphony, Till Eulenspiegel, Don Juan, and Ariadne of Naxos. I had like all this Strauss for some reason come my way as this young conductor, and I had done it. And this is like unheard of. And I look back and I think, you know, that was incredible for me to have that. It changed me. I'm not afraid of that size of a force of an orchestra. In fact, I prefer that. What I had to get used to was smaller groups and working with that. So I'm really fortunate to have had all those opportunities and to have conducted such incredibly complex and amazing pieces so early on as a conductor. I'm sure I was a mess, or, you know, I would not conduct those pieces like I did back then, but that I had that opportunity really helped shape me and teach me, because you have to know how to do something to get through some of those pieces. Maybe my blind, naive confidence as a young conductor would help me, I'm sure, back then, but it helped create this kind of attitude that I adopted of nothing scares me. I know how important it is to prepare and how difficult music is, but bring it on. So I just like developed this thirst for more. I wanted to learn more. I wanted to get more in my hands and in my brain as a conductor. And yeah, I think, well, all those things contributed. There were plenty of down points, of course, along the way. I think every young conductor experiences so much of why won't they pick me? Why can't I get something? Why can't I get into a school? Why can't I get a job? And I had plenty of that. But I never gave up. I kept working hard. And when I did have moments of wondering should I give up? Should I move back into viola? I sought help from friends and shared my difficulties and my trials and tribulations with them. And it was through, you know, being open and honest with myself and my loved ones that I was able to persevere through those tough times. And I think every musician, no matter what your area is, we're going to have tough times. I remember being told being a musician is a world of no, but you only need one yes. And that's not easy for everybody to navigate. And for some of us, we have a much longer time before we get that yes. But I think if you have an idea of where you want to be and you work hard, pathways will open up. It may not be the exact pathway you thought or the exact end result, but never give up. I was just talking to some students at my former university yesterday when I was a guest on their conducting class. And I said, never, ever stop dreaming. No matter what age, it's never too late. It's never give up, because you never know what could happen. At my age, I didn't think, and where I was at in my career, that my professional opportunity was probably gone. I actually thought that. I had some auditions, got very close to a few of them, but I thought, well, I love being a university conductor and I'm going to be the best one I can be. And then this opportunity opened up and the call happened and I took it, and it reminded me too, like, never give up on your dream, and anything is possible. Whether you believe it or not, you never know what life has in store for you.
Yeah, I think that's all wonderful advice, especially in the music world. So you just mentioned, you know, teaching at the university and then coming over to conduct with Pacific Symphony. And that leads me to another topic I wanted to talk about with you, which is, I assume that you have to sort of play a slightly different role, whether you're working with students or professionals. And your work with Pacific Symphony is working with a mix of both. So working with the symphony for things like family concerts and youth concerts, and then also being the music director for the Pacific Symphony Youth Orchestra. And I'm just curious, how do you, like, in what ways do you find that your role changes when you're working with students, whether they're college students or high school students, versus a professional orchestra?
My philosophy, and I'm sure it's going to evolve over time, but has been for a while, no matter who I'm conducting, what group I'm conducting, I conduct the same. I know some people have a different view, but I have found that, well, I couldn't keep track. I can't say for a middle school group, I'm going to do this. For a high school group, that's good. For a high school group, that's bad. I'm going to do, and for a youth orchestra, that's, I think, for me, going down that path was going to confuse me more. I thought, just be a great conductor. How about that? And always conduct the same, like with greatness. And when I started working, when I was a college professor and started guest conducting and clinicking high school groups and middle school groups and honor and region orchestras, I thought, well, let's see how it goes. And it went. It's like when people say, speak to a young person like an adult and they will behave in such a way. Speak to them like a child and they'll give you a child. Very much that translated. When I conducted just the way I conduct, like whatever piece was in front of me, whether it was an arrangement of Ode to Joy or Mahler 1, I'm going to conduct the same. I'll make whatever music happen that we're doing, but my conducting is going to be what my conducting is. And it worked for me, at least. That I never had to adjust. Slightly, depending on the repertoire, if you're working with a middle school group, there's probably the repertoire is going to require maybe more information and less interpretation, possibly. So there's that. So you also adjust to the repertoire, I think. So I'll adjust to the repertoire, but I never think of altering my conducting. And it's worked for me, at least. That's the way I think about it. Now, the difference, though, I've always told myself, whether it's New York Philharmonic or this youth orchestra or high school or university, is what your context is with them. So if you're in a training atmosphere, youth orchestra, college, middle school, high school, not only do you share music and what you need as a conductor and are asking for, but then you have to go beyond that and train them and tell them. So how do you accomplish that sound? How do we get this aligned? How do we balance or blend this section? How do we make this music mean something deeper? You have to explain that. But you also explain it differently with a college level musician than a middle school level musician. So you have to be aware of what their knowledge is, what their capacity is, so that you could speak to that and challenge that. Because that's also one of the things you need to do as a conductor educator. So that is kind of my general view of what I would say in a rehearsal. And with working with professionals, I think you just need to say it clearly and with as few words as possible. And then when you get to working with younger musicians, you say it and you back it up. You provide more information contextually that will help them achieve that goal. So it depends on what age and what level you're working with. Now, most of my background as a conductor has been working with youth groups, whether youth orchestras, college, high school, and I love that. I love working with young players. I mean, my life was really transformed in my youth orchestra, and I know that. So youth orchestra particularly is important to me and always has been, because I mean, I don't know if I would have gotten through my teenage years without my youth orchestra. I know that may sound funny to hear, but it was my outlet. It was how I got out of the house on the weekends. It was everything to me. And I made friends from all over the city that I normally would not have made because I had this opportunity. My quartet that was on From the Top was created out of youth orchestra folks. And I'm still really, really good friends with so many people that I had that experience with. So I love working with young musicians. That's always just been a passion of mine, I guess, because it made such an impact on me as a young person. So I guess I'll tell one on myself. As I came to Pacific Symphony, I thought, I've worked with some professional groups, and I know there's some differences, particularly in the communication, and every orchestra is its own body and own community, and every music director is as well. But I thought, Jake, are you gonna mess up? How is it gonna be? Because I've mostly worked with young players, and I knew, don't teach these people anything. If anything, they're going to teach you something. So be respectful of them, and just be careful about what you say, because my like body language, my lingo is so geared towards working with young people where you should follow up and say more. And so I was actually a little nervous, like, don't mess up, treat them like great musicians, because they are, and just go make music with them. Well, now that I've had my opportunities to conduct the orchestra a few times, it worked well. All those things that I was a little worried about, I found were mostly in my head. And as a musician, I went up there and I was like, well, what would you do as a violist in a quartet? Be a musician. Just go make music. You know what your job is, your responsibility. Let them play, learn from them. They're an orchestra that's been together longer than you have been with them. So don't be one of those, conductors who tries to, rebuild the wheel, especially as an assistant conductor. So just go be yourself. That's a hard thing to do when you're nervous, or if you're in a stressful environment. But I actually found it to be not stressful. I found it to be very natural, and it just continued to get more familiar and fun. I actually had a lot of fun, and I thought, if this is how the beginning is, I can't wait for the next chapter and the next chapter and the next chapter, because I think it's going to be awesome. It was awesome. Going to be even more awesome.
So speaking of nerves or lack of nerves, I wonder if you can talk to us about your audition for Pacific Symphony and what that was like. I unfortunately was not there, so I didn't get to witness that. But yeah, I think people would be really interested to hear, like, what is a conductor audition like? What does it consist of? What were your feelings going into it? Yeah, anything you'd like to share?
So I think auditions for conductors and assistant conductors can vary much more than maybe instrumental auditions for orchestras, because it's a lot depending on what the group is interested in and how they want to conduct their conductor searches. So there's that. But for assistant conductors, I think in general, with top level orchestras, whether they have an open call or not, that's their option. You basically are, whether you apply or they come to you, if you make it into the semifinals, or you're now invited. So I'll skip to that part. Up to there, it's kind of the same. Either you apply or they come to you, and they might need some information and some videos, and you get through that. But if you are invited, that's when you get the repertoire list, which usually is daunting. Typically, or it's just enough of pieces that are very long and have so much to learn that you realize this is big. I need to get to work last year for this audition that's coming up, when you get your rep list. So you pull that music out, you get questions answered if you have them, and if you don't have them, be sure that you are very clear of what you are expected to do, what pieces, what additions, all that. Their orchestras are usually like way organized compared to young conductors, and they send you everything you need, and they answer any questions you have. So you get that list, you freak out, of course, at first, and then you get to work. And you study and you study and you study, and most of us are working other jobs or multiple jobs. So you study in the car, you study at night, you study in the morning, you never stop thinking about it, at least me. I would jog and have my playlist going, and every moment I was trying to get myself immersed in this repertoire. You do some research about the place and the organization, you practice, and you do whatever it is that you practice as an individual. Then you get there. And there's usually a couple of rounds. They let you know 2, 3, and how it's going to work. So this particular audition, there's a few interesting things. The other assistant conductor auditions I've had with big orchestras, the first day was interviews and conducting. And if you made it to the next round, there may be more interviews or not, and more conducting. This particular audition was first day, just conduct. If you made it to the second round, the next day, then you had interviews and more conducting. Also, another interesting thing I found with this one was, you would expect in a position like this where you're a youth orchestra director and an assistant conductor, typically, not always, but typically the first round is conduct the youth orchestra. Let's see how you work with them so we can narrow it down, and then we'll put the smaller, whoever advances in front of the professional musicians. This was the opposite. And I thought, wow, that it was really telling what Carl and what the orchestra was looking for. And I thought that was actually amazing to do. Let's see you work with the professionals. And those who can advance, now let's see you work with youth musicians. So I just thought that was fascinating and interesting. So the first day we picked numbers. I went last, and I love going first or last. So I was like, yay. But I also knew that was a lot of waiting. And we were put in a room together, so we chatted. This was probably one of the most nerve-wracking moments, because you're meeting each other, you're being nice to each other, but you're also going, wow, that's so-and-so. I think I've seen you on YouTube. And didn't you just win that big award 2 years ago? So there was a little of, here's what I've done, here's what I've done. And I'll be really honest. I was probably the oldest person in the room, or second to oldest. And on paper, I think, probably what most people would have said, the least experienced, or just the weakest, I bet, on paper. Because we had people who had been conducting and were currently conducting as assistant conductors and cover conductors, really big orchestras. I had had some opportunities, but mostly I worked with youth groups and universities. So in that moment, I felt myself compelled to make myself little, make myself go, well, of course I'm not going to get it. So-and-so's here, and this guy's been working with this opera orchestra, and she's amazing. But in that moment, I felt it, and then I thought, nah, I'm here. They obviously see something in me, and yeah, he's working there and she's working there, but I've been working there, and I have maybe some more experience and maybe wisdom to bring to the table. So I was like, don't worry about it. Just bring yourself, bring your goods. It's up to them, and whatever happens, happens. So then I waited and waited and waited, got a little nervous, got a little less nervous, but mostly got excited. So they brought me to the stage, and I was, of course, starstruck. Like, what a beautiful hall. Wow, that's a lot of players. They're very close. I remember thinking that this orchestra sits close together, and I loved that. And it's like, wow, here we go. So I got to pick my first piece, or my first two pieces. I found it really easy to conduct the orchestra. I found them very receptive and willing to go with whatever I was giving them. Carl then asked for a few pieces. Of course, it all happens like a dream. In 1 second, your 25 minutes is gone. And I felt really good. I thought this was a pretty good representation of myself. Sure, there was some nerves, but not debilitating nerves. And then I thought, well, that was great. Let's see what happens. So that night, the orchestra was performing a concert, and they gave us all tickets. I was there, and they told us, you'll be hearing from Eileen, one of our people, to see who advances to the next round tomorrow. Well, I was checking my phone, but I don't get cell service in the concert hall. So I was frantic at the intermission going outside, and I ran into one of the other conductors who had just talked to Eileen and did not advance. And so I was like, oh my God, my heart was racing, but I was trying to just be there for the other conductor, walk them back to the hotel. And then Eileen called and texted, where are you? I was like, well, I'm on my way back just from across the street. So, well, can I talk to you after the concert? And I thought, oh, so close. I want to know. So I was like, yes, absolutely. That second half lasted a lifetime. I'll tell you that. I just was like, come on. Well, two more pieces. Orchestra sounds great. Where's Eileen? So she said, meet me in the lobby. After the concert, I was out, but it was a special performance, and there was a reception going on upstairs. And I was waiting and checking my phone, and nothing. Finally, she said, hey, I'm looking at you. I'm upstairs. You can come on up. Oh, okay, I'll come on up. So we went to the side. She pulled me to the bench, and thanks so much for walking so-and-so over. And how are you doing? I was like, yeah, I'm good. The concert was great. Of course, inside I'm freaking out and nervous and excited and going, here we go, moment of truth. And she said, yeah, I hate giving people bad news. And I thought, I got it. That's okay. I'm ready to go home, and it was fun to be here. She said, but I'm so glad I don't have to give you bad news. And I was like, you did it. You were pulling my chain, but I was like, wow, that's amazing. And so then I was like, bye-bye, I'm got to go prepare for tomorrow, working with the youth orchestra, and then a lot of interviews, a lot of conversations with different people, different groups. I had the most fun with that. I love interviews. It's part of what I teach what I taught in my conducting classes was interview prep. And how do you have successful interviews? I'm no specialist by any means, but interviews don't scare me. They actually intrigue me, and I find them, I'm like, that's an opportunity. Use it. Be comfortable speaking to people and speaking about yourself, especially if you want to be a conductor. You need to have that skill, but you have to practice it. So the interviews were great. They were tough. I mean, the questions were serious and real, but I thought I loved that portion of it. And funny enough, I told Carl when I got here, the nerves for me conducting came with the youth orchestra, because I thought, these are good young people. I mean, they're phenomenal. They were playing really at a high level. And I thought, do I get really deep really fast because they're good? Do I nitpick a detail? Do I not? So that's what I was torn. Like, what do I do? I said, stop thinking and go up there and make a difference. You'll know in the moment, just get up there, stop thinking. Your head's getting in your way. So I got up there and I just rehearsed like I would rehearse any group that I had. And I guess it worked. So here I am, fast forward a few months and pandemic, and I couldn't be more grateful.
That's a very cool story, and I was getting very nervous hearing you tell it.
You're telling me.
So I have a number of other things I want to talk to you about, but I want to make sure we get to some questions first.
Sure.
So let's look through some of these. First of all, Carolyn Brothers wants to know, what is the hardest and the easiest thing about conducting?
Wow. Funny enough, I think the answer is the same. It's what I just mentioned when I was getting ready to go work with the youth orchestra. The hardest thing is our thoughts. You know, there's so much preparation for any musician, for a conductor, I think especially. We have to learn a lot of parts, a lot of repertoire, just like everybody does. But not only that, we have to be a communicator. We have to be someone who can read a room and read a large ensemble to know when it's time to say this or not. When they need something different, what am I providing or not? So you have to be so prepared with the musical portion of what you're doing so that you can also be the human portion of what you're doing. And also, as a young person, to learn leadership skills. One of the nerve-wracking things is typically assistant conductors look out at a group that's mostly older than them, who's been doing this a long time, and here you are, and you get to tell them what to do, or they're gonna follow you. Well, they will if you're good to them. They don't have to also, or they can make your life kind of tough if they want to. And so believing in yourself and knowing that, sure, I hope to continue to evolve and learn as a person and as a conductor and musician, absolutely. But where I am right now in this moment is also really great, good enough, and I have something to offer, even these advanced, amazing musicians. So let them have you. So that's the hardest thing. And I think the easiest thing, because who knows you better than you? And who is the easiest person for you to be? Yourself, but also the hardest to be in moments of nerves or when something really matters to you. It's so you can so easily get in your head to try to get it right that you don't get it right. But to get it right is to be free to be yourself and be vulnerable enough to let them see you for who you really are. Then if it's a no, it's okay, because you were true to, you let them see you. It doesn't always work out. It's like dating. You know, you could have a blind date. I have a friend who's really great and another friend who's really great. They went on a date, they didn't like each other, but they're both really great. That's okay. That can happen with conductors and orchestras. Sometimes it really works. I think it's really working.
We have some other questions. Let's see. Oh, Dennis Lambert wants to know if you have ever dropped your baton during a performance. He has been a subscriber for many years and has never seen that happen.
I don't think in a performance, no. In rehearsal, yeah. And it's gone flying, I think once or twice for sure. And I have to say, this has always been early on one of my fears as a conductor. Like, what if that happens? Really. So one of the things I did change early on, I used to use a baton that was a wood handle, and wood handle, because they're wood, they're smoothed out. There's usually a finish on it so that you don't get splinters. Well, my hands sweat when I play viola or when I conduct. It's just, I'm a sweater when I work. So I quickly learned this is dangerous when you're a sweater. So I went to a baton that has a cork handle. And since then, knock on wood, no issues.
I'm pretty sure that, and I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this, so I'm pretty sure that Carl has dropped or accidentally thrown his baton during a concert, but we will pretend that didn't happen.
I would say it's probably going to happen. So, it happens.
Yeah. Okay, Scarlett Baker wants to know, what does your conducting schedule look like for the next year, next season? Any plans on having concerts again with the orchestra, youth ensembles, or things you're excited about in particular?
Excited about everything. Right now, it's hard to say what the future looks like tomorrow, next month, in a few months. So the one thing I think we're all learning, especially as an arts organization and an orchestra, is to be flexible, to, yes, make plans, and to be okay when those plans completely get thrown out and make more plans. So flexibility and adaptability is the name of the game right now. There's a lot of frustration too, I know, for everybody as we try to map out going forward in this pandemic. I think things look promising, of course, for the future. Yes, there are performances planned for all ensembles, youth orchestra, and beyond. But it's hard to say exactly when, but the moment, I'll tell you this, the moment we can, we will. For the youth orchestra and the orchestra. The moment we can, we will. And yes, we have a few things already on the books for the next season and such. I think it's maybe premature to share that because an expectation might be created and things might change. So I would say, yes, we have a lot of things on the schedule for what I'll be doing with the youth orchestra, with the orchestra in terms of family and youth concerts, and as well opportunities to guest conduct other orchestras in other places. But right now, I think we're all just trying to get going more and more. And then hopefully the next big step is be able to open up the hall for audiences to come join us. But until then, I think what we're doing with streaming performances and recording performances is an absolute wonderful alternative to having our audiences there with us. And the moment we can, we will.
Awesome. And then we've got a question from Amira, who wants to know what it was like arriving here with the orchestra in Southern California at the start of the pandemic.
Oh, scary. I was worried. I was in Texas and California at the time, because I was in talks with the administration. Both of our states were not doing great with this pandemic. In fact, it was like, okay, if you're gonna go anywhere, just don't go to those two states. There was that moment. So I waited a little bit because we were virtual. So I was able to work from Texas, and I did for a little while. And then things started to not be so bad, and I was able to come here. But one of the challenges was, because of the pandemic, we had made the choice that, no, I'm not gonna go out there to look for apartments or places to live, just to avoid that risk of traveling and being out there at that time. So people from the orchestra, thank heavens, were helping me. They would go look at places, they would meet with apartment owners and such, and then take pictures and let me know, since I couldn't be there. So I'm really grateful that I had such a wonderful group of people to help me. I found a wonderful place. And my dad and I got my stuff, put it in a U-Haul, and we drove out together, which was fun. We've done that before. He's moved me a couple of places, and got myself situated here. I was excited, of course, because I'm in this new state and in a new place, starting a new job. I was mostly still working from home at the time. So it was a little odd, but I was still like starstruck. I loved being here. I loved this new chapter in my life. And even though it was not what I expected initially because of what was going on, I never complained, because I was still reminding myself that this was an opportunity of a lifetime, my dream come true. And here we go. No matter where I was, even if I had stayed at the university, everything was different. Life was different for all of us. So why not start a new chapter inside of everything being different? Because everything is different. So it kind of worked perfectly in a way. And then because we were mostly virtual, I was able to explore my surroundings a little bit more than I probably would have initially. So I've tried to take advantage of what's available during this odd time. And I'm also really excited that we're back in the concert hall making music. I mean, that has changed everything. It's so wonderful.
Yeah, I agree. That's very refreshing and makes it all worth it. I think we have time for one more question. I'm going to sort of combine two that we got from Rosalind and from Daryl. So Daryl wants to know, what is your favorite style, period, or composer to conduct? And I'll sort of tie into that Rosalind's question, which is, what Richard Strauss might you want to program for the youth orchestra?
So I would have to say in general, I'll give the conductor response, because it is true. It's hard for me to say one style or one composer. We typically do fall in love with the music we're conducting. Maybe not every piece all the way, but part of being a conductor is learning to love music in its different forms from different composers, different times and different styles. And honestly, when I really get into a piece and study something, I learn to hear it in a different way and feel it. And then I feel better, more equipped to conduct it when it comes from me. Now, sure, not every piece resonates in me like some. So there are works that always are special to me, but I really do love a lot of music. The era of music I really love the most probably is the Richard Strauss, Mahler. You know, like I said, I started conducting major forces as a young conductor, and that's where I kind of gravitate towards. I love Mahler symphonies. I love gigantic orchestrations, Richard Strauss, Wagner, but Debussy, Ravel, also gigantic orchestrations in some pieces, but a very different sound, you know, a veiled sound sometimes. But those, particularly those composers, are some of my very favorite. And for the youth orchestra, well, who knows what we could possibly see in the future with Richard Strauss, but I think any one of the tone poems would be a wonderful place to begin. You know, Don Juan is always exciting, also Sprach Zarathustra, but I mean, there are so many great pieces by Strauss. I'm particularly myself partial to De Rosenkavalier Suite. That opera has a very special place in my life and in my heart. And I think the music from it is exquisite and very demanding. So that's probably what I would program, but I would never program to indulge myself. I think that's one of the pitfalls for a conductor. You program for what it provides for the ensemble and the community that you serve, never for yourself. And that at least has been my guiding force when thinking and choosing repertoire. Never for me. I love a lot of music always to serve and to better the ensemble and to serve the community that we are fortunate enough to have.
Awesome. Well, I just want to thank you so much, Jake, for coming and spending this hour with us. It's so nice. I mean, you and I have gotten to work together last week quite a bit, but it's nice to get to just chat and to learn all about you and your background and hear your thoughts on all of this stuff. So thank you. And I think it's wonderful for all of our guests here to get to know you more too.
Ben, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you today, but also to work with you. I mean, you are so amazing. I have to say, every time I look over at Ben, he is so focused and calm that when I get a little flustered, I know I can go right to Ben and find my center really quickly. So it's been-
Maybe you could help me find my center.
It's been, well, such a pleasure. And so many people in the orchestra have gone out of their way in this weird time where we have to stay so far apart to welcome me, to say hi, to talk to me, to reach out to me. And I really am appreciative of that. I can't wait to get to know the orchestra more and better, as well as our audience members. So everybody who's been on today, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. I'm so excited to be the new member of the family and of the team of Pacific Symphony and Pacific Symphony Youth Ensembles. I think our future is bright. I love being a part of this state, this family, this area. And I really am excited about all the things that we have planned and in store for not only the rest of this season, this summer, but next season and beyond. So I can't wait to put this computer away and meet you all in person, and we'll do that as soon as possible. But until then, thanks for spending some time with us today. It's been a real honor and a privilege to share this hour with you all. And Ben, thanks again.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, everybody. And we'll see you next week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.